Amazon says it will not be building a second headquarters in New York City. The decision comes after the retail and tech giant faced backlash from local leaders and residents. CBS News correspondent David Begnaud reports.
It was the Valentine's Day breakup that kicked off celebrations at the site of what would have been Amazon's new headquarters in Long Island City, Queens. New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
I think it's incredible. I mean, it shows that everyday Americans still have the power to organize.
In a statement, Amazon said a number of state and local politicians have made it clear that they oppose our presence and will not work with us to build the type of relationships that are required to go forward. New York City was among 20 top city contenders to house a second Amazon headquarters. Amazon promised a $2.5 billion investment and 25,000 jobs. In return, New York offered $3 billion in state and city incentives.
Congratulations!
There were lots of protests and debates over the benefits of large tax subsidies for one of the world's largest companies and the rising cost of housing in New York City. Polls showed a majority of New Yorkers supported Amazon's move to the state. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who helped to lure Amazon, condemned those who trashed the deal, saying a small group of politicians put their own narrow political interests above their community. Ernie Brooks has lived in Long Island City for the last 40 years. His house would have been less than 100 yards from the new headquarters.
It's symbolic of one thing that's really wrong with this country today, which is the dominance of large corporations that don't pay tax, that don't really support the community.
Disastrous, quite honestly. I've been
Frank Raphael represents the other side.
Queens. This could have been a legendary event for Queens, and unfortunately, I think New Yorkers sort of messed it up.
It might be a little hard to see in the dark, but the new Amazon headquarters would have gone right here along the East River in Long Island City, Queens, looking out at Manhattan. It's beautiful, isn't it? You know, today the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago sent a letter to Amazon essentially saying, we're sorry to hear what happened in New York, but we'd love for you to take another look at Chicago. Elaine?
David Begnaud, thank you. CNET senior producer Dan Patterson joins me now. So, Dan, of course, Mayor Bill de Blasio was a huge supporter of this project. How has he responded to Amazon pulling out?
Well, according to sourcing, there's been a public reaction and internal reaction. Internally, the mayor's office was pretty frustrated, of course. They put aside their differences with the governor's office. For those of you watching who are not in New York City, there's a long-standing rivalry between the governor and the mayor. But they put this aside to work on this deal, and this took a considerable amount of effort. So they're pretty frustrated inside the office. The external reaction was probably the most humor Mayor de Blasio has expressed publicly in a long time. He said, quote, you have to be tough to make it in New York City. We gave Amazon the opportunity to be a good neighbor. And I mean, Twitter was ablaze this afternoon with, hey, look, sometimes you just can't hack it in New York City. And
right.
So the mayor's statement at least was a little tongue-in-cheek, humorous.
Yeah. Well, but what might this mean? You talk about the rivalry, if I think it's fair to call it, between the mayor and then the governor. What could this mean for both Bill de Blasio and Governor Cuomo?
Well, both of them have political aspirations beyond their current jobs. And both of them, it's pretty fair to say, had looked at this deal as something that would be not just good for the city and the state of New York, but something that would help them say, hey, look, we're forward thinking, we're on board with technology, and we're on board with the future of the economy. And so this is something that really was a setback for both of them in individual and personal ways. It was also a setback, according to our sources inside the mayor's office, for the deputy mayor, who had hoped to have this be one of the crowning jewels of her tenure before she leaves office.
So several state and local politicians did not support building an Amazon headquarters in Long Island City. So why were they actually against this?
Well, if you live in the city or if you live in any city, you understand that transportation, that housing, and that jobs are just very challenging. So the trains that would service Long Island City, there was anticipated congestion. The housing prices, if you looked at the maps, it really would have been a financial challenge for that neighborhood. And the jobs, although it would have brought 25,000 jobs to the city, it's not clear what those jobs would have meant to the neighborhood or to the borough of Brooklyn. Additionally, Amazon was given billions of dollars in subsidies that I think probably was the match that sparked outrage.
Yeah, and on that point, Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted this, quote, "Today was the day a group of dedicated everyday New Yorkers and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed, its worker exploitation, and the power of the richest man in the world." Is this really a loss for Amazon, Dan?
Well, in the short term, it might appear to be, although, look, Amazon is capable of putting their second headquarters in many places, and they put the split of HQ2 in Northern Virginia in close proximity to not just many policymakers, but also many people who could help Amazon strategically figure out where they will put their next version of HQ2. We've heard these rumors about Nashville and other locations. So, look, Amazon is a major technology firm. All of these technology firms are under fire right now for many of the issues that the Congresswoman from New York raised. On the other hand, Amazon is a massive corporation, and they're capable of absorbing a public relations blow like this without it really setting back their business.
So ultimately, let's say that Amazon, in fact, stays with the one headquarters in Northern Virginia. Is it still going to hire those 25,000 workers, you think?
Right now, that's unclear. They will certainly hire tens of thousands of additional workers. Where these people will be, and again, the types of jobs, is still pretty ambiguous.
Well, before we let you go, there's some reporting I want to ask you about. The Washington Post says that Facebook is negotiating a record fine with the Federal Trade Commission to settle the investigation into the social media company's privacy practices. What can you tell us about this?
So this story is late breaking and it's fascinating. This could be the largest fine levied by the FTC against a technology firm. And look, Facebook has been embattled for the past year. What we are seeing is potentially, if not an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, I don't know that we would go quite that far, an acknowledgement that, hey, look, regulation is on its way, and if we pay a fine now, if we negotiate in good faith, we might be able to at least get back to business and kind of put the 2018 data privacy stories behind us, or at least that's their rationale.
I mean, if Facebook and the FTC do reach some kind of deal, does that mean, do we know if that means Facebook will just go back to the way that it previously handled people's privacy data?
Well, Facebook won't be able to stave off regulation. Of course, Europe has the GDPR, that's the General Data Protection Regulation, and California has introduced new regulations, as well as New York State. At least it's being proposed. There are data privacy protection laws being proposed in New York State. So it won't protect Facebook and other big data companies from regulation from states and other entities that could have a stake in the protection of consumer data going forward.
All right, Dan Patterson. Dan, thanks very much.